As you can see, I have my beautiful Roger Federer posters in the background. Um, he's a man, and I'll probably mention his name a few times today. I wanted to help players understand. Again, we're talking development, we're talking coaching. Right? These are super important, high-level concepts that they're really great to think about off the court. I'm guessing if you're watching this video, you're not on the tennis court. You're probably at home, sitting in front of your computer. After a long day of tennis, your legs are probably tired, your feet are aching a bit. I'm just reading a little bit into that, but anyways. So, discussion of development is understanding the long-term development cycle, the development process, so to speak. And it's natural for the human mind because, again, we all have these human biases. We all are influenced by what we hear around us. And there's something called oversimplification of the human mind, right? We create mental shortcuts, as discussed in a prior video. These mental shortcuts are just to help us, perceive the world in a more easy way and not use as much energy. But we always hear, and just the way people speak about it, it almost sounds like everyone was an overnight success. You hear a player come up through the ranks, and it's like you hear even terminology like, "Wow, they're blessed with a great forehand. They're a natural talent that can't be taught." All these things, and that might be true to some extent. That might be true. Let's take Rafael Nadal for example. Wow, he's a special player, and it's 100% true. Rafael Nadal is a very special player, but there's this bias here that's sort of for the human mind to assume it was always like that, right? Like when you hear about a successful person, it's always assumed that there was just some circumstance that made him or her that way, and we forget about in terms of what's portrayed, let's say on TV or the media per se, we forget what goes on behind the scenes to make that really happen. Yes, Rafael Nadal is a very special player, but behind the scenes, it took hundreds of, I'd say hundreds of thousands of hours of hard work, dedicated training, mental focus, and discipline to sculpt himself into that tennis player that we know of today, right? He didn't just become Rafael Nadal sitting on his couch. This was a guy who put in the work, who put in the hard yards. And yeah, a lot of times people make it seem like he just popped out of the womb and there he was, Rafael Nadal with his forehand and his incredible speed. But this is something he had to sculpt over time. See, we all know, let's say you're into weightlifting, increasing the your muscle mass or your I guess muscle definition. Let's say, I mean, I'm not into this a whole lot, but let's say like a bodybuilder. We all know that you cannot get a six pack abs overnight. It's impossible. It takes many years of core strength and crunches and dieting to achieve that goal, right? And so you have to think of yourself almost like a bodybuilder. Each day you're on the tennis court, you're looking to improve 0.1%. Weeks go by, months go by, thousands of balls later, you improve a percentage. And then you factor variability in. Of course, anything can happen in a match. But with this continual hard work, you start to sculpt yourself over time into a more well-rounded and well-defined tennis player. And this is a natural progression of how development works. It's a slow, arduous, and grinding process. It doesn't happen overnight. People just don't wake up with these natural talents. And and play amazing tennis. Of course, it takes the talent with the hard work. You need both, with the technical knowledge and training, as we've discussed in other videos. But even for someone who's talented, it's a relatively slow process. And so why is this lesson really important or applicable to you? Why should you care about taking this long-term sculpting a six-pack abs mentality? Well, a lot of times we look at players, and let's say like a Roger Federer or Rafael Nadal, who put many hours of work into their game. And by just thinking other players are talented, instead of empowering ourselves and saying, I can do that too, see the mentally weak way of thinking about it is that guy's special. That guy had a great. That guy was born with a great forehand. That guy was born with natural strength. Oh, I can never be like that player. That's true. You might not be exactly like that player, but have you put in the hundreds of hours to improve in that area and then said you can't be like that player? Or did you just look at that player and assume because you might not be quite as talented, you can't reach that goal? Now you're probably talented in many other ways, in other ways you don't realize, but you want to take the mentally empowering approach, that because that forces you to raise your work ethic. Really, what I tell players is that's the only variable you can control. You can't control whether you were born with special talents. You can't control a lot of external circumstances. You can only control the internal factors, right, that are directly within your reach, and the biggest thing being effort level. So until you put in the hours and you sculpt, you can turn yourself into something. See, we're all kind of cut from the same cloth, right? Rafael Nadal, if he was, if he decided to make nothing of his life, for instance, and not apply his abilities, he could be, he could be a janitor cleaning the toilets for all we know, if he just sat there on his couch all day. But it's really the underlying baseline is always work ethic, right? And with that, you can sculpt yourself into something quite beautiful and quite impressive, even if you won't play tennis at the highest level, on the world level. I've seen players who aren't all that athletic play Division I tennis and be very successful. Okay, and that's just the power of work ethic, right? So take the I can do that too approach instead of he or she is so special approach, right? That's going to empower you. That's going to have you take action instead of sit back and just take the mentally lazy approach, the oversimplification approach, and not reach your potential. All right, so that's a wrap for this video. Again, we're discussing development topics, coaching topics. This should be the driving force behind your thinking. Aside from all the minutia we talk about, maybe that might be more technical or mental related, but these are the broad strokes that over the long haul serve you well to adopt this type of mentality. The funny thing is, I want to mention before I end the video, is when I think they asked Rafael Nadal one time in an interview, some conference. He said, Rafa, they just mentioned something about it. Rafa, you're such a special player. How do you describe yourself? Yada yada yada. And Rafa looked at them and said, I'm not special. I don't see myself as special. I don't consider myself special. And look, we all know he's special. Is he delusional in a way? Maybe. But you can even see here the great Rafael Nadal. He has to protect his mind against this bias that he is special, because only telling the result of just telling himself that he's special, there's nothing good that can come out of that. all that would come out of that is him thinking he's special and being lazy and thinking tennis and life and everything else is going to hand it to him on a silver platter and he doesn't have to apply himself. Rafa knows that despite him being a great talent, he has to still outwork the hardest working player out there, the hungriest player out there, and many would maybe consider him one of the hungriest or the hungriest player out there, right? So it's super important for you to know if Rafael Nadal doesn't consider himself special and a great talent, should you? And I'm not saying you shouldn't have confidence in yourself. I'm saying you should put all 100% of your focus into the factor you can control, because whether you are special or not, it's your underlying effort level that's going to help you hit your potential, and hitting your potential is really all you can control. All right, so we really focus on that one concept here today. I'll diversify a little bit more and talk some different tennis concepts again to apply this to you. You can either rewatch this video or think about this, but I do personal consultations over the phone. And I know I mention these in every video, but it's really the best way to 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 work the mind, to rewrite the code in your mind, to get you thinking on the path for success. Right. So let's set that up. Email me below. Some of this is included in the book as well. We want to make sure you have the full package. You're the most equipped to give yourself a competitive edge in today's game. All right, so I'll see you on the next time and talk to you soon.